There I was on a Tuesday morning at 9:45, standing in my own hallway like a ghost, in a house I thought I owned emotionally, clutching a coffee mug that suddenly felt like the only relationship in my life that wasn't lying to me. Betrayal doesn't always come with dramatic music. Sometimes it arrives in a tailored suit, speaking too confidently on speakerphone. My husband, Daniel Hayes, was in our living room, calm, casual, destroying our marriage the way someone cancels a subscription. "Mom, I'm telling you, I'm done with her," he said. Done. Like I was a project that failed to meet quarterly expectations. I can't live with a woman who thinks me sleeping with my assistant is such a big deal. It's not the Victorian era. The mug froze halfway to my lips. Sleeping with his assistant. When had that become public knowledge? When had adultery turned into a personality trait? On the other end of the phone was his mother, Patricia Hayes, the human embodiment of a migraine in pearls. 3 divorces, each husband wealthier than the last. She treated alimony like medals of honor. "Oh, darling, finally," Patricia purred through the speaker. "You deserve someone who understands your lifestyle, your ambition. That poor girl still drives that old sedan, my sedan. Fully paid off, reliable, loyal. Unlike my husband." Daniel laughed, actually laughed. And something inside me cracked. Not shattered, just cracked. Like glass that will hold until it doesn't. "She makes the same breakfast every Sunday," he continued. "Eggs the same way. Who does that? People who believe in consistency, in commitment." I didn't confront him. I didn't cry. I just stood there listening to my marriage being professionally dismantled. Then I heard the sentence that changed everything. "I already spoke to Gerald Henderson. Papers are ready. She'll sign. She's too soft to fight." Too soft. I walked back to the kitchen, set the mug down carefully, and looked at the calendar on the wall. September 14th, our anniversary. A heart drawn around it, in his handwriting. I smiled. Because Daniel was right about one thing. I wouldn't fight. And that was going to be his biggest mistake. My name is Olivia Anderson. I'm 36 years old. On paper, I was the kind of woman men's mothers should have adored. Stable, educated, predictable. Apparently, that was my flaw. Daniel and I met 8 years ago at a charity networking gala downtown. He was charming in that polished corporate way. Navy suit, confident smile, the kind of handshake that lingered just long enough to imply importance. I was there for free shrimp cocktail. He was there to expand strategic connections. He told me he worked as a senior marketing executive at a subsidiary agency owned by Sterling Industries, a massive corporate conglomerate. He spoke about growth trajectories, upward mobility, performance metrics. I spoke about efficiency models and logistics optimization. He thought I worked in mid-level operations for a regional supply chain company. That's what I let him believe. Technically, it wasn't a lie. I did work in operations. I just didn't mention I owned the firm. At the time, I wasn't hiding. I simply didn't feel the need to announce that I was the founder and CEO of OAA Consulting Group, a boutique consulting firm specializing in supply chain restructuring and compliance optimization. I preferred to keep business separate from romance. Clean lines, defined categories. Daniel mistook that for modesty. He loved telling people how grounded I was. We dated for 2 years before getting married. In those early years, he adored my steadiness. He'd say things like, "You make me feel stable, Liv. I love that you're not high maintenance. You're safe." Safe. I didn't realize at the time that safe in his vocabulary meant temporary. There were signs. Of course there were. Daniel was obsessed with upward mobility. He tracked other people's cars the way normal people track weather. He measured success in square footage and brand labels. When friends upgraded condos, he'd spend the entire evening recalculating our trajectory. "Don't you want more?" he'd ask me. "I want peace," I'd answer. His mother, Patricia, never warmed to me. From the beginning, she'd tilt her head and smile thinly. "What exactly do you do again, dear?" "Operations," I'd say. She'd nod in that way that translated to adequate. She adored women who matched ambition with lifestyle. Translation: Women who came from money or married into more of it. I came from nothing, built everything, quietly. 3 years before Daniel and I married, I founded OAA Consulting. I structured it meticulously with my attorney, Jennifer Collins, specializing in asset protection and corporate separation. The company was registered under my initials. All major assets, property, vehicles, investments, were purchased through the LLC long before our wedding. The house Daniel believed we bought together, owned by the company 2 years before our engagement. We signed a lease when we moved in after the wedding. He signed it without reading it. I didn't hide it, I just didn't emphasize it. Every year, I paid myself a reasonable salary, $82,000. That's the number Daniel knew. Respectable, mid-level, predictable. The rest of the profits stayed in corporate accounts. Daniel never asked detailed questions, he assumed. And assumptions are expensive. Meanwhile, my firm handled contract compliance for multiple Sterling subsidiaries, including the marketing agency where Daniel worked, which meant quarterly performance reports from his division eventually crossed my desk. Not Olivia from operations. Miss Anderson, CEO. He never connected the dots. He thought the consulting firm auditing them was some distant corporate entity. He didn't realize the entity made him dinner every Sunday. When I overheard him that Tuesday morning telling his mother I was too soft to fight, I realized something painfully clear. Daniel never truly saw me. He saw what he wanted. A placeholder, a stepping stone, a safe investment until something flashier appeared. And now that he believed he'd found more, he was ready to liquidate. What he didn't understand was that I'd built my life like a fortress, and he was about to learn exactly how solid the walls were. Looking back now, the affair didn't begin the day Daniel slept with his assistant. It began the day he started believing he deserved an upgrade. At first, it was subtle. Longer hours, client dinners, new cologne that wasn't mine. He used to come home tired but present. Then he began coming home distracted, eyes glued to his phone, smiling at messages he wouldn't share. One night I asked lightly, "Big campaign launch?" He didn't look up. "Yeah, just high-performance people doing high-performance things." High-performance people. It became his new favorite phrase. Then came her name. "Emma's really stepped up," he'd say. Sharp mind, not afraid to challenge ideas. Emma, his assistant. 28, ambitious. Impressive LinkedIn presence. I knew her from compliance reports. Her performance metrics were solid. Her proximity to my husband was improving. The first time my instinct stirred was over mileage. Yes, I am that woman. I don't snoop emotionally. I analyze. Daniel's office was 12 miles from our house. Yet on several late nights, the odometer showed an additional 40 to 45 miles. When I casually asked, he shrugged. Traffic detours, meetings off-site. The tone was smooth, too smooth. Then I noticed charges on our joint card. We maintained separate accounts, but shared one for household expenses. Between groceries and utilities. Marriott downtown, $362. Client development, $389. Private dining, $411. Client development, at a hotel, 3 times in 1 month. My chest didn't burn, it went cold. Cold is worse. Cold means clarity. I created a spreadsheet. Yes, a spreadsheet. I titled it Behavioral Variance Log. If he was going to lie, I was going to quantify it. I logged dates, expenses, mileage, late meetings, and social media activity. Daniel posted like he was auditioning for Entrepreneur magazine. Great strategy session tonight. Growth never sleeps. Posted at 9:42 p.m. GPS data from our family plan showed his car parked at the Marriott garage at 9:40 p.m. Data doesn't care about excuses. Within 2 weeks, patterns emerged. Average affair frequency, approximately 2.1 times per week. Peak days, Tuesday and Thursday. Predictability is the enemy of arrogance. Meanwhile, Daniel grew bolder. He criticized me more openly. "You're too comfortable, Liv. You don't push yourself. You're content being small. The irony nearly made me laugh. I was reviewing 7-figure contracts while he rehearsed motivational slogans in the mirror. Patricia began calling more frequently. I overheard fragments. She's stable, but stagnant. You deserve a partner who matches your acceleration. Acceleration, like I was holding him back. I kept cooking dinner, kept packing his lunches, kept asking about his day. He mistook composure for ignorance, but I wasn't being naive. I was gathering proof. The final piece clicked during the annual company gala. Daniel insisted I attend. You don't have to, he said too quickly, which meant I absolutely did. That night, I met Emma properly. She wore confidence like a tailored blazer. She smiled at Daniel a half second too long. And when she shook my hand, she said, "I've heard so much about you." It was evaluative. Like she was assessing what she'd be replacing. That was the moment I knew, not emotionally. Mathematically, the probability of an affair had surpassed 90%, but I still hadn't confronted him because I needed one more thing, leverage, and Daniel, in all his ambition, had already handed it to me. He just didn't know it yet. The confrontation didn't happen the way movies promise. There was no shattered glass, no screaming, just a folder and a PowerPoint presentation. It was Saturday morning, 10:15 a.m. I was making coffee, the same way I always did, when Daniel walked into the dining room, dressed like he was about to pitch to investors. Blazer, crisp shirt, controlled expression. "Olivia," he said calmly, "we need to have a productive conversation about our future." Productive. He'd already decided I was an expense to be cut. The dining table had been rearranged. Legal pads, bottled water, matching pens, his laptop open. On the screen, moving forward, a strategic proposal for mutual separation. Presented by Daniel Hayes. I actually had to sit down. He dimmed the lights. Dim the lights. As if divorcing me required ambiance. "Please hear me out fully before responding," he said. I nodded. He clicked to slide 2, a Venn diagram titled Emotional Compatibility Gaps. "Our marriage no longer aligns with my long-term growth strategy," he explained, using a laser pointer. My long-term growth strategy. He was talking about replacing me like outdated software. Slide 3, comparison chart. Left column, Olivia's priorities. Stability. Conservative financial decisions, predictable routines, risk avoidance. Right column, Daniel's aspirations, elite networking, luxury lifestyle alignment, high growth environment, dynamic partnership. You're comfortable with mediocrity. I'm not. The word mediocrity hung in the air. It would have stung if it were true. Then he clicked to the final slide. A pie chart, 60% labeled Daniel's allocation, 40% labeled Olivia's allocation. "I'm not asking for alimony," he continued smoothly, "but given my earning trajectory and my contribution to our social capital, I believe this reflects fairness." Social capital. He meant Emma. He thought she was capital. "The house," he continued, "should remain with me. It's closer to the city and aligns with my professional lifestyle." Aligns. Our joint savings, retirement accounts, equitable split. I'll keep my vehicle, you can keep the sedan. The sedan again. He sat back. "I've already retained Gerald Henderson. Papers are prepared. I think we can do this maturely. No drama. No drama." My pulse didn't race. My hands didn't shake. I felt something far more dangerous. Stillness. I looked at the screen, at the pie chart, at the man who thought he'd calculated everything. "You've thought this through," I said quietly. Relief flickered in his eyes. Yes, I didn't want this to be messy. Of course not. He slid the folder toward me. "Just sign and we can both move forward." Forward. He meant upward. I opened the folder. Scanned the pages. He believed we owned the house jointly. He believed the vehicles were personal property. He believed my retirement account was marital. He believed everything was shared. He believed wrong. I reached for the pen. Daniel blinked. "You're Not going to argue? I signed. Every page, calmly, slowly. He watched, confusion growing. You agree? I closed the folder and slid it back. You clearly know what you want, I said evenly. Who am I to stand in the way of your growth? He hesitated. He wanted resistance. He wanted outrage to justify his betrayal. Instead, he got composure. Thank you for handling this maturely, he said carefully. I stood, picked up my coffee. And Daniel? I added. Yes? I hope you get everything you think you deserve. He smiled. He thought that was support. It wasn't. Because while he was presenting slides about growth, my attorney was finalizing documentation proving that every major asset he listed belonged to OAA Consulting Group. Not to us, not to him, not to our marriage. And the woman he'd called soft had already structured her life so precisely that his entire PowerPoint was about to collapse like a poorly audited balance sheet. He just didn't know it yet. After Daniel finished his presentation and walked out to take a call, I remained seated at the dining table, staring at the blank screen where his pie chart had glowed minutes earlier. 60%. He had quantified my worth. I didn't cry. I pressed my palm flat against the cool wood of the table and focused on my breathing. Inhale, exhale. Slow, measured. I am not weak, I told myself. I am wounded. There's a difference. The strange thing about betrayal isn't just the act. It's the recalculation of memory. Suddenly, every anniversary, every Sunday breakfast, every I love you becomes suspect. Had he already been with her when he kissed me goodbye that morning? Had he already decided I was temporary when he slipped that wedding ring on my finger? I walked into the kitchen and washed my coffee mug slowly, deliberately. You gather. You wait. Daniel returned an hour later, softer in tone. I know this is hard, he said carefully, leaning against the counter like he was comforting a junior employee after layoffs. But we've grown apart. We. He needed it to be mutual. I turned toward him. When did it start? I asked. His jaw tightened. What? Emma. Silence. There it was. The microsecond pause that confirms truth. He exhaled slowly. That's not the point. It is to me. He rubbed the back of his neck, a tell I'd memorized years ago. It just happened. We connect differently. She challenges me. She works for you, I said evenly. That's unfair. So is infidelity. His expression hardened. I didn't want to hurt you. The audacity. You didn't want consequences, I corrected quietly. His eyes flashed irritation. You're twisting this. No, I said steady. I'm clarifying it. For a moment, I saw something flicker behind his confidence. Doubt. He had expected tears, rage, pleading. Instead, I was calm. And calm unsettles people who rely on emotional chaos to win. You're really just going to let this go? He asked. Let this go. As if forgiveness was the topic. I signed the papers, I replied. You wanted clean. He studied me carefully now. What are you thinking? The truth? I was thinking about documentation timestamps, asset protection clauses, compliance audits. I was thinking about the fact that the consulting firm reviewing Sterling's subsidiary reports, including his department, had authority over contract renewal recommendations. I was thinking about Emma's employment agreement and non-fraternization policies, but I didn't say any of that. I'm thinking, I answered softly, that I ignored a lot of things. He shifted. What things? The way you looked at people who had more than you. The way you measured worth in square footage. The way your mother talked about marriage like it was a merger. He scoffed. This isn't about my mom. It always is. Silence stretched between us. For the first time, I saw him slightly unsure. You're not fighting, he said again, almost disappointed. No, I replied. I'm not. He nodded slowly. Good, that's mature. Mature. He mistook restraint for surrender. That evening, I retreated to my office, the spare bedroom he rarely entered. I opened my laptop. Pulled up OAA Consulting's corporate files. 7 years of immaculate documentation. Property titles under the LLC. Vehicle registrations. Lease agreement with both our signatures. Separate banking structures. Tax returns showing asset separation long before our marriage. Everything legal. Everything clean. Everything boring. Boring saves you. I called Jennifer. He filed, I told her. And? She asked. He thinks he's entitled to half. She paused. He has no idea, does he? No. I leaned back in my chair. He called me soft. Jennifer laughed quietly. They always do. There was a pause. Are you okay? She asked more gently. That question landed deeper than I expected. I'm disappointed, I admitted. Because he cheated? No. Because he underestimated me. Silence. That hurts more, she said. Yes, it did. Because betrayal wounds the heart. But being dismissed? That wounds the ego. And I am many things. Soft isn't one of them. I closed my laptop and stared out the window at the city lights. Daniel thought the story was about divorce. He thought the climax had already happened. This was just the opening move. And I had been building the board for years. 3 days after Daniel's PowerPoint divorce pitch, his mother came over, unannounced. Of course, Patricia Hayes entered my home, technically the company's property, with the confidence of someone who believed victory had already been secured. She wore cream silk, oversized sunglasses, and the expression of a woman attending a funeral she had personally arranged. Olivia, she said coolly, air kissing somewhere near my cheek. I thought we should talk woman to woman. I gestured toward the living room. She sat without invitation. Daniel hovered awkwardly behind her, clearly having summoned reinforcements. Daniel tells me you've agreed to the settlement, Patricia began, folding her hands. That's wise. Dragging these things out only makes everyone look small. Small again. I folded my hands in my lap. I prefer clean outcomes. She smiled thinly. Good. Because Daniel has an important future. He can't afford distractions. Distraction. That was my new job title. Daniel cleared his throat. Mom, maybe we don't need... Patricia waved him silent. You've been comfortable, Olivia. There's nothing wrong with that. But my son is destined for more. He needs someone aligned with that. Aligned. I almost admired her consistency. And Emma? I asked calmly. A flicker crossed her face. She's ambitious, Patricia said carefully. Young, driven. Sleeping. Daniel's jaw tightened. Mom, that's enough. No, Patricia continued. Let's be honest. Daniel has always outgrown his environments. Outgrown. I looked at my husband, the man who once told me I was his safe place. He didn't correct her. That was the moment something shifted inside me. Not heartbreak. Clarity. Patricia leaned forward slightly. You'll move out, of course. The house makes more sense for Daniel's lifestyle. The house. My house. Owned by my company. I tilted my head. Of course, I said softly. Daniel relaxed. Patricia smiled. They thought I was agreeing to surrender. In reality, I was documenting tone, statements, assumptions. After she left, Daniel tried to soften the atmosphere. You know how she is, he said. Yes, I replied, I do. She just wants what's best for me. And what's that? He hesitated. Growth. There it was again. He turned life into a corporate ladder. And what happens if growth collapses? I asked. He frowned. What does that mean? Nothing, I said lightly. Just a question. Later that week, things escalated. Daniel received notice from HR regarding an internal review. I knew about it before he did. Because OAA Consulting handled compliance oversight for Sterling subsidiaries, including workplace conduct investigations, I didn't initiate anything. I didn't report him. But corporate systems trigger when patterns emerge. Expense anomalies. Hotel charges labeled as client development without client invoices. Repeated after-hours badge access for 2 employees. Emma and Daniel had been sloppy. Confidence makes people careless. That Thursday evening, Daniel stormed into the house, pale. They're auditing our department, he said. Our? I asked gently. My department, he snapped. I nodded. What for? Compliance review. Some flagged irregularities. I held eye contact. Is there something irregular? He looked away. This is ridiculous. Emma's freaking out. Emma. He said her name like I was supposed to care. Did you tell her you're divorcing? I asked. Yes. And? She thought it would happen faster. Of course she did. Daniel paced. This is temporary. Just noise. Noise. That night, he slept in the guest room. Out of tension. The next escalation came via Gerald Henderson. He requested additional documentation from my attorney. His tone had shifted dramatically. Less shark. More cautious swimmer, sensing a larger predator. Daniel confronted me 2 days later. Why didn't you tell me about your company? He demanded. We stood in the kitchen, neutral ground. I didn't hide it, I replied. You signed lease agreements. You saw company documents. You made it look small. I made it look private. That's manipulation. I held his gaze steadily. Daniel, you're accusing me of manipulation while having an affair with your subordinate. He flinched. I wasn't planning to hurt you. I know, I said softly. You were planning to upgrade. Silence. His voice lowered. Did you know about Emma before I told you? Yes. How long? Long enough. His shoulders dropped slightly. You were collecting evidence. Yes. Why? I stepped closer. Because when people underestimate you, they reveal everything. For the first time, I saw fear flicker, not fear of losing me, fear of losing control. 2 days later, HR formally suspended him, pending investigation. Emma was suspended as well. Daniel's confidence cracked. Someone reported us, he muttered. No, I said quietly. You reported yourselves with carelessness. Patricia called, screaming that night. How dare you sabotage my son? I listened calmly. I haven't done anything illegal, I replied. You humiliated him. No, I said. His actions did. She hung up. Daniel didn't speak to me for 2 days. He stopped calling me soft. He stopped calling me anything at all, because something was dawning on him. The woman he believed was stable and small was neither, and the life he thought he was entitled to take was never his to claim. Escalation doesn't always involve shouting. Sometimes it's systems activating, policies triggering, truth surfacing, and the most dangerous thing a betrayed woman can become is patient. The suspension letter arrived on a gray Monday morning. Daniel opened it at the kitchen island, the same place he'd once presented his divorce strategy. I watched his face as he read. First, irritation, then disbelief, then something heavier. They're terminating me, he said quietly. No theatrics, no anger, just stunned silence. For cause. Those 2 words hit him harder than the divorce ever had. Sterling Industries had completed their compliance review. Evidence of a relationship with a direct subordinate. Misuse of company expense accounts. Violation of internal ethics policies. Immediate termination. Emma was terminated as well. Daniel lowered himself into a chair like gravity had increased. They're saying I breached fiduciary responsibility. I didn't respond immediately, because inside, something complicated was happening. I wasn't celebrating. I wasn't relieved. I felt tired. Tired of the unraveling. Tired of being the quiet witness to the collapse. Tired of loving someone who mistook ambition for entitlement. He ran both hands through his hair. This is because of you, he said suddenly. The words came out weak, not accusatory, just desperate. I met his eyes. I didn't report you. You're the compliance consultant. Yes. And you're telling me this is coincidence? I held steady. I don't manipulate systems to punish people. I design systems so they function. He laughed bitterly. You're enjoying this. That accusation hurt more than I expected. I'm not enjoying anything, I said quietly, because that was the truth. This wasn't revenge. It was fallout. He stood abruptly, pacing. Emma's career is ruined. Mine is ruined. We were building something. Building with someone else. In secret, I said gently. He stopped. You don't understand, he whispered. You're right, I replied. I don't understand betraying your spouse and calling it growth. Silence. Heavy. Final. Later that afternoon, Patricia called. Her voice was no longer controlled silk. It was frantic. Daniel told me everything, she said. They fired him. They humiliated him. They enforced policy, I answered. You did this. I didn't. You set him up. I structured my life before I met him. There was a long pause. What do you want? She demanded. The question startled me. What did I want? I looked around the kitchen, the least kitchen, the life that had quietly split open. I wanted a partner, I said softly. She didn't respond. For once, Patricia Hayes had no strategic comeback. That night, Daniel packed a suitcase, not to leave triumphantly, to retreat. I'm staying at Mom's for a few days, he said without looking at me. I nodded. He paused at the door. For what it's worth, he added quietly, I didn't think you'd fight. I held his gaze. I didn't. He opened his mouth like he wanted to argue, then stopped, because he finally understood. I hadn't fought. I had simply not surrendered. The house felt enormous after he left, echoing. I walked into the dining room and stared at the place where he had stood with his laser pointer. For the first time since everything began, my composure cracked. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just a slow exhale that turned into a tremor. I slid down into a chair and pressed my palms against my eyes. This wasn't victory. This was loss. Loss of the version of him I thought I married. Loss of the future I believed in. Loss of the illusion that love could exist separately from character. Being underestimated hurts, but being unloved properly, that cuts deeper. I had built an empire, quietly, protected it meticulously, but none of that protected my heart from realizing the man I loved saw me as a placeholder. I sat there in silence for a long time. No spreadsheets, no strategy, just grief. Because even when you win legally, you still mourn emotionally. And in that quiet, painful space, I asked myself the only question that mattered. If he called tomorrow and begged, would I still want him? The answer came slower than I expected, but when it arrived, it was clear. No. 3 days after Daniel moved back in with his mother, I received an email from Jennifer. Subject, final review. You need to see this. Attached were the official compliance findings from Sterling's board review. Normally, I wouldn't look twice. My firm handles dozens of these each quarter, but this one involved Daniel's division. I opened the document slowly. The findings were clinical, objective, brutally precise. Violation of supervisory ethics. Misrepresentation of expense reports. Failure to disclose conflict of interest. But what stopped me wasn't Daniel's name, it was Emma's. Buried in the appendix was her signed acknowledgement of company policy, including a clause she had personally reviewed during a training session Daniel himself had conducted 6 months earlier. He had taught the compliance training. He had explained the non-fraternization rules. He had warned employees about power imbalance, and then he had violated it. The irony wasn't just poetic, it was damning. Jennifer called moments later. Sterling's board is escalating this internally, she said. Daniel, didn't just break policy. He exposed them to liability. Liability, the word he used to throw around so casually in meetings. Is there more? I asked. There was a pause. Yes, she said carefully. Emma filed a grievance. My spine straightened. For what? She claims the relationship blurred professional boundaries and influenced her performance evaluations. Silence filled my office. Daniel had framed it as mutual, as dynamic, as growth. But power dynamics distort reality. When your boss is also your secret partner, consent becomes complicated. I'm not involved in that process, Jennifer clarified quickly. OAA's contract is strictly compliance oversight, but this will follow him. Follow him. For the first time, I didn't feel sadness. I felt distance. The kind of distance that comes when the fog clears and you see the entire structure of events. He didn't just betray me. He compromised his integrity. And integrity doesn't regenerate easily. That evening, Daniel called. His voice was lower than I'd ever heard it. They're saying Emma filed something, he said. I know. You know? His tone sharpened. It's in the compliance reports. He was silent. I didn't pressure her, he said quickly. It wasn't like that. I believe you think that, I replied. What does that mean? It means power feels invisible to the person holding it. He exhaled sharply. You think I manipulated her. I think you liked being admired. He didn't deny it. I never thought it would blow up like this, he whispered. There it was. Not remorse. Shock at consequences. And you did? He asked. Yes. Long pause. You always seem so small, he admitted quietly. That sentence landed strangely. I was quiet, I corrected, not small. Another pause. I didn't know you owned the house, he said. I didn't know about the firm. I didn't know. You didn't ask. Silence. You're not who I thought you were, he said finally. I am exactly who I've always been. The shift happened in that moment. Not dramatic. Not explosive. Just final. He was no longer the man I needed validation from. He was simply someone who misjudged me, and I no longer needed him to understand me. The next morning, I signed the final divorce confirmation. Clean, efficient, legally precise. No house transfer, no asset division, just dissolution. Daniel texted once more that afternoon. We should talk. Maybe there's a way to fix this. I stared at the message for a long time. 3 months ago, that text would have broken me. Now? It felt small. I typed slowly. I hope you find what you're looking for. Then I blocked his number. Not out of anger, out of clarity. The turning point isn't when the other person collapses. It's when you stop hoping they will. And in that quiet moment, sitting in my office, overlooking the city skyline, I realized something powerful. He hadn't ruined me. He had revealed himself. And revelation is the most efficient form of closure. Consequences don't arrive all at once. They cascade. A week after the divorce was finalized, Sterling Industries made an internal announcement. It wasn't dramatic. It was corporate, sterile, strategically vague. Leadership transition due to ethics violations. That was it. Daniel Hayes, former senior marketing director, erased in one paragraph. No farewell email, no dignified exit, just absence. Through professional channels, I learned what followed. In corporate language, sidelined. Emma's grievance investigation expanded quietly. HR documentation showed a performance review he'd written for her during the affair, unusually favorable compared to prior quarters. That pattern mattered. Boards don't like patterns. Patricia called me again. Her voice had lost its edge. You've made your point, she said. I didn't try to make one. He can't get hired anywhere reputable. That's not my decision. You destroyed his trajectory. I let the silence settle. No, I replied finally. He did. She exhaled sharply. He's depressed, she added, almost as an afterthought. For a second, just one, my chest tightened. I had loved him. You don't switch that off like a light. But love does not equal rescue. I hope he gets help, I said calmly. She didn't respond, because she knew I wasn't coming back. Meanwhile, the social circle Daniel had curated began to dissolve. The same executives who once laughed at his jokes stopped returning calls. Invitations dried up. Networking dinners vanished. Growth requires reputation. Reputation requires integrity. Integrity had cracked. 2 weeks later, he emailed me. Not dramatic. Not desperate. Just stripped of polish. Olivia, I underestimated you. I thought ambition meant noise. You were building quietly the whole time. I'm sorry. Daniel, I read it once, twice. Then I closed it. Apologies after collapse are different from apologies before. Timing reveals intent. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Because the true fallout wasn't just professional. It was personal. Daniel had to confront something far worse than job loss. He had to confront misjudgment. He had looked at a woman who built a 7-figure consulting firm and called her mediocre. He had mocked consistency and lost stability. He had chased acceleration and hit a wall. As for me, I moved out of the house, not because I had to, because I wanted a clean psychological line. The property remained under OAA Consulting. I listed it for lease. Business is business. I purchased a downtown condo, 32nd floor, skyline view. Owned, of course, by the company. Efficient, structured, protected. The day I moved in, I stood by the window, watching the city lights flicker on. There was no champagne, no triumphant music, just stillness. My phone buzzed. A message from Dave, a colleague at Sterling. Daniel, tried applying at a startup. They did background checks. Offer rescinded. Word travels fast. I typed back. Systems work because they do. I never called HR, never exposed him publicly, never sent evidence to his board. I simply allowed the framework he violated to function. Truth is self-executing when documentation exists. 3 months later, I ran into Emma at a coffee shop. She looked smaller than I remembered, less sharp. She recognized me immediately. I didn't know, she said quietly. I know, I replied. I thought it was mutual. I studied her for a moment. He was your supervisor, I said gently. Her eyes dropped. I thought it meant something. It did, I said. Just not what you thought. We stood in silence. I'm sorry, she added. For what? For hurting you. I nodded once. Take care of yourself, I said. And I meant it, because she wasn't the villain. Arrogance was. The final piece of fallout arrived unexpectedly. Sterling's board renewed OAA Consulting's contract for another 3 years. Increased scope, higher retainer, professional trust strengthened. They valued discretion. They valued systems. They valued results. And the woman Daniel once described as too soft to fight had simply let reality do the fighting for her. Revenge isn't explosive. It's quiet. It's legal. It's documented. And when it's done correctly, you just step aside and let gravity work. 3 months after everything ended, I found myself standing in my new condo kitchen, making coffee. The same way. Same measurements, same patience, same quiet ritual. And for the first time in a long time, it felt peaceful. Not because Daniel had fallen, not because Emma had apologized, not because Sterling renewed my contract, but because I was no longer shrinking to fit someone else's ambition. There's something no one tells you about betrayal. It doesn't destroy you. It reveals you. Daniel thought growth meant louder rooms, flashier titles, faster acceleration. I built something different. Steady income, protected assets, silent resilience. He called it small, but small things endure. He chased image. I built infrastructure, and infrastructure outlives performance. People assume revenge is dramatic. It isn't. The most powerful form of revenge is preparation, documentation, discipline, self-respect. I never screamed, never exposed him publicly, never begged. I simply refused to collapse. One evening, as I stood on my balcony watching the city lights stretch across the skyline, I realized something that felt almost gentle. I had loved him, honestly, and I left him cleanly. No games, no manipulation, just boundaries. That's not softness, that's strength. My sedan still runs perfectly, by the way. Reliable, consistent, fully paid off. It never needed validation from luxury parking garages. Sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one holding the strongest position. And sometimes the woman they thought was too soft to fight was simply patient enough to let everyone else reveal themselves. I didn't win because he lost. I won because I never abandoned myself. And that will always be worth more than 60%.